I think the general consensus here is going to be, yeah, it's too early. There's some negatives, there's some positives. When it comes to looking at both the offensive profile, the bullpen, starting pitching, it's 15 games. The highs are going to be super high. The lows are going to be super low. I think, Sean, you said it perfectly. It changes every pitch, every inning, every game, every day. It's changing so rapidly that it's like, let's just get through the next 2 weeks. Let's get through the next 3 weeks. Let's figure out what this team is once things start to stabilize.
Well, and can I give you guys an example? Just yesterday, the Saturday game, Jake Berger ties Jorge Mateo in 2023 home runs. They both have 3. Jake Berger is now second in the team in home runs. He didn't make the opening day roster. So, again, I don't know how to stomach that to the point where my guy Andrew Vaughn, who I'm trying to say he's ready to take over Jose Abreu, his OPS is currently 830, which is matching Jose Abreu's past 3 years outside of 2020. So he's filling the role fine. He's a little bit below average at defense, but also it's April. Maybe he'll get a little bit more comfortable in the position. And like Jordan said, his walk rate's nearly 15%. I mean, Andrew Vaughn has been fine. But here I am questioning where they could play Jake Berger because every time he swings and makes contact, it's 115 miles per hour off the bat. You need a bat like that in the lineup. But he can't play third base, but you kind of need him to because Hanser Alberto now just went to the IL, and Yohan Moncada's back is on the IL. So who's your third baseman? It's Jake Berger, who Vinny, right before he played third base in 2023, is telling me he'll never play third base again. So that's pretty drastic right there. Does he play first base, right? You know, that makes the most position. That's where he's been this whole spring training, but are you really going to bench Andrew Vaughn? But, like, you can't play Vaughn anywhere else. We saw that. He can't play the outfield. You really need the DH spot for Eloy Jimenez because he can't stay healthy. Like, this team's just a mess. And Andrew Benintendi, like, you spent $75 million on that man? Like, that was your offseason? Like, you go out, like Nick said, is like all that's changed is Benintendi. And, like, he's not walking. And to your point, they're not pulling fly balls. My guy, Andrew Vaughn, has not hit a home run yet. You look at his spray chart, there's no pulled fly balls. It's the best pulled fly ball was the Pablo Lopez double. That was truly just a flare that was to the warning track. Like, he just got it over the left fielder. Like, and even Benintendi, he's the same guy that we saw. It's a lot of opposite field fly balls. I really don't love the makeup of this team. They need to walk more, and they need to start hitting for power. And I don't understand how the Orioles, with their players that are, you know, not these top prospects like Andrew Vaughn, Eloy Jimenez, whatever. And, you know, they got Jorge Mateo, whose career high before this was 13. He's got 3 already. Like, I don't – you talked about ball and error at the trade deadline, and have you done that, Rick Hahn? Like, what have you actually done to make those changes? I don't understand how this team is not selling out for power and doing it somewhat successfully. They keep failing.
I think the biggest thing is the Jake Berger point for me. It's like 3 home runs, that's great. How did you not put him on this opening day roster? I think that was a conversation we all sort of had. I think how many episodes ago was we're like putting it together. It's like, I have a hard time leaving him off. I have a hard time looking at this team and saying it's better off without it. My, call it hot take, meatball take, whatever it's going to end up being once it inevitably gets clipped up and put on Twitter and I get destroyed for it, see what Moncada can do back at second base. If you really think you need to get Berger in the lineup that badly, see if he can handle himself over there. Small sample size. He was terrible defensively there in 2018. Small sample size in 2017. He graded out fine there. I don't like the idea of doing it necessarily, but at a certain point, if the only guy who's selling out for that power, Sean, as you're saying, is the one you can't fit in the lineup, you almost have to fit a square peg into a round hole at some point. You know, you almost have to say, is the offensive upside worth the defensive truly downgrade it's going to be to move Jake Berger into a fielding position other than first base? Again, hot take me, but whatever it's going to end up being, it's something that almost has to be seriously considered. Again, you don't want to overreact to 15 games, but when the only guy right now hitting home runs is the guy who you couldn't even make the opening day roster because he didn't have a position, the common saying is, you know, hit the baseball, they'll find a position for you. And it almost feels like that's what the Sox have to do here, if this is something we still see 2-3 weeks from now, obviously.
Well, I think the way you have to look at it, you guys touched on a lot of my favorite points with the White Sox because I was very much a big Jake Burger guy. Even last year, really trying to push him to stay on the major league roster in any way that you can. I understand the idea that it's very hard to try to keep him on the field, especially when you have a Yoan Moncada at third base. And I always kind of memed about the idea of playing Jake Burger at second base, but obviously that's not realistic.
Well, Duke, can I follow up with a meatball take here?
Go ahead.
Jordan brings up Yoan Moncada moving back to second base. I think that's a bad idea because we see Yoan foul a ball off his leg, and then he gets completely disinterested in the game. You put him at second base, he's going to be disinterested. He doesn't want to play second base. He's a great fielder at third base. Don't fix what's broken. He barely, we barely get the production we want out of Yoan Moncada. So I don't think moving him to second base is the right thing. The real meatball take here is that what the White Sox should have done, instead of putting Andrew Vaughn in right or left field, is made him a second baseman. Tony La Russa wanted it. He's a better athlete than Jake Burger. I'm just saying, we've seen Mike Moustakas do it. I think if we saw Andrew Vaughn lumber out in left field and right field, I would have seen at least a season of Vaughn at second base. So Jake Burger's just not quick enough. He's such a bad fielder. I mean, I would hate to give up Moncada, who plays nearly elite or at least top 75 percentile defense at third. I'd hate to give that up for Jake Burger, who's going to make an error at
and that's
2 errors in the series.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like the question of is the offensive upside worth the defensive downgrade? Probably not. Actually, at the end of the day, that's kind of how you see that question kind of answering itself. We've seen the issues as they've operated. Andrew Vaughn at second base is something I feel like we saw it in a spring training game or something. Like they at least tossed it around.
He started there in Kansas City a couple of years ago, and I don't remember anything crazy happening. Yeah,
a doubleheader. I think.
Yeah, doubleheader. Yeah, it was like a weird La Russa lineup game, but that was it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty par for the course for a Tony La Russa lineup, anyway. But I guess to my point that I've been dying to make here for a minute, because you guys have brought up a lot of the points I make up with Jake Burger as far as offensive upside against defensive downside. I'll wager you this. This is the name that always comes to my head when we have this discussion. He's a guy who is not a baseball Hall of Famer, but should be a baseball Hall of Famer. He was a horrendous fielder, but he played a lot of second base, third base, and first base. His name was Jeff Kent. He was a guy who could flat out hit baseballs, and he could hit so well that teams would accept how bad he was on the defensive side of things because he produced that much on offense. Now, I'm not saying Jake Burger is Jeff Kent, but I'm saying there is a legitimate argument that can be made that the offensive upside is good enough for the defensive downside. And while I do agree that I don't want him starting every day in the field, do I want to see him mess around at DH a little bit more? Yes. And do I think he'd be a more than competent first baseman if Andrew Vaughn were to play second? 100%. I actually really like that idea. I do also think that, while Yoan's, feelings should be taken into consideration to a point, Yoan would profile so well with what his normal numbers are as a second baseman. Anyway, he'd be one of the best power hitting second basemen in the league compared to where he's kind of a mid-tier power hitter at third base right now. And I know that doesn't necessarily totally matter in a sense, but I really think Yoan could even try to earn himself a little bit more money on that second contract, hitting what he does now at second base if he were to take that kind of role. Do I want to give up a potential Gold Glover at the hot corner? That's a hard discussion to have. But when Jake Burger has not only done it in these 15 games, but has also had a pretty strong stretch last year where he was hitting for power, he at a certain point was carrying our offense, at a time where our offense was completely dead. People were trying to do the Yermin Mercedes comparison to him, but I really think he profiles so much better as a natural hitter, and I think that's why he was a first-round pick in the first place. So I do think, I agree, there is downside to it, but at a certain point when a guy's hitting, you have to find a way to keep him in the lineup every day. And, while some people might kind of start coming to the idea that does Eloy need to be in the lineup every day? That's something we need to see play out as well. I think Eloy is too good of a hitter not to be, but regardless, Jake Burger, we need to score runs, especially if our bullpen's going to play the way it is. And I think that's really the direction we need to go. We need to find a way to get Jake Burger into the lineup. And I genuinely agree with you guys. I can't believe he was not an opening day guy.
Well, right now with Hanser and Moncada on the IL, we don't have to worry about Berger not getting playing time. He will. Berger will be getting playing time, so at least for the next 10 days or so, whatever, he'll be fine and he'll be getting playing time. Two, if he keeps hitting, he'll probably just knock Hanser Alberto off the team. I mean, do we need Hanser Alberto on this team? I mean, they're both below average defenders. I mean, Jake Berger's a better baseball player. He just might make the roster that. The Kent thing is interesting, but like, it doesn't even matter if he plays defense. Like 30 teams have DHs. Like you don't have you can't really make him the Sox DH because you're paying the Sox DH $43 million. You can't make him the third baseman because you're paying the third baseman $75 million, right? Like the White Sox have their money made. Like that's why Yasmani Grandal isn't going to be going off this team anytime soon. Hey, he's blocking pretty well so far. If you're looking at Statcast,
top blocker as of Sunday. I was gonna tweet it, but I'm waiting a little bit before I open my mouth and
Chuck
then
beat you to it.
Stick my foot in it later. But
Chuck beat you to it. Chuck's
did
already
he?
got the Statcast. Yeah, Statcast leaderboard. I saw it from Chuck first.
Dang it.
But that's the thing is like will Jake Berger have value in the trade market? Like I don't need Jake Berger on this team. Like we have a lot of power hitting righties. Like get me a power hitting lefty. Like Gavin Sheets. Ugh. Like Gavin Sheets' walk rate is great. Oh my God, it's the best on the team. Can he hit a double? Can he hit the ball hard? Everything is just. I mean, he's like Andrew Benintendi, but 6'4", and he can't play defense. Like Gavin Sheets is the one that really bugs me because he might be a bad baseball player. Jake Berger can hit. Jake Berger could be a bench bat. I mean, hey, make him Matt Stairs. I mean, I don't know what he is. Maybe he doesn't have a ton of trade value, but I mean, he might be a guy that come 31, he just gets a ton of playing time, and it's like Dan Vogelbach. I mean, like his power is insane.